there are certain common elements that come through that are obviously culturally bound. So where you just happen to be born determines which religion you are a part of. So explaining it in a way refutes it in the sense different than it would be if it was, say, I'm explaining why people vote Republican or why people vote Democratic, something like that. Because we know those are made up categories. Religions are making different claims. They're making absolute claims to truth. And therefore the explanation that there's a cultural, behavioral genetics origin of it then, I think, provides positive evidence that we made God and religions, not vice versa. For example, flood myths show similar cultural influence. The Epic of Gilgamesh, which predates by centuries the Noachian flood story, tells exactly the same story. And anthropologists tell us that cultures that are next to large bodies of water that flood tend to have flood myth stories. Virgin birth myths are likewise spring up throughout the ages. Among those alleged to have conceived without the usual assistance of a male include Dionysus, Perseus, Buddha, Attis, Krishna, Horus, Mercury, Romulus, and of course, Jesus. Consider the parallels between Dionysus, the ancient Greek god of wine, and Jesus of Nazareth. Both were said to have been born of a virgin mother who was a mortal woman, but were fathered by the King of Heaven. Both allegedly returned from the dead, transformed water into wine, and introduced the idea of eating and drinking the flesh and blood of the Creator, and both were said to have been the liberator of mankind. For some reason, there's like that Joseph Campbell stuff about recurring myths that happen again and again, perhaps a product of our brains, of our culture, some combination. There are resurrection myths, same thing. There's lots and lots of resurrection stories that well predate the Christ story, like Osiris, the god of Egypt that was said to have died and come back, just like the sun goes down and comes back. And initially, only the Pharaoh gets to be resurrected, but the Egyptians cleverly decided that if everybody can be resurrected by believing in the God King, including the Pharaoh, you can get a lot of free labor to build monuments. So in that sense, then, I think let's take a look back at the origins of religion and God belief. So first of all, we're pattern-seeking primates. We look to connect the dots to explain things in the world. God is the ultimate pattern connection device. It explains everything. And we also tend to infuse these patterns with agency, intentional agents that are invisible and run the world, control things. They control the weather, angels and demons and aliens and poltergeists and gods. These are just things we infuse from about the age of several months old into objects that we think of them as intentional agents. We know from behavioral genetics studies that roughly 40 to 50% of the variance on people's religious beliefs are accounted for by genes. That is, your inheritance, your propensity to believe this versus that is explained by your genetics. Now, it's not that there's a gene for Catholicism or Baptists or something like that. It's that certain religions appeal to certain kinds of temperaments that are genetically programmed. So just like some people tend to prefer to vote liberal, others to vote conservative, in part, at least half, because of their personalities and temperament and the kind of political parties they prefer, same thing with religion. Some religions tend to offer more that we like. So you know God is man-made and religions are man-made when they happen to like and hate the same people you like and hate.
Okay, so I'm a materialist, a monist. I'm not a dualist. I think humans are by nature dualists, that we think that there's an extra substance, a soul, a spirit, an agent, a hidden force, some kind of energy, a god, a gods, whatever. But that's a product of our brains misperceiving the world and infusing into it these hidden, invisible agents that we think are there that aren't really there. And you know I'm right because I'm a published skeptic anyway. So if you get a brain injury, if you get a stroke, particularly dramatically Alzheimer's or senility or dementia, as the neurons die one by one, so does your mind. There is no mind. The mind is just one of these fuzzy words that gets thrown about, that if we try to operationally define it carefully, we find we're just describing what the brain does. So mind is just a word to describe what the brain does. The soul is just a word, a fuzzy word, to describe our pattern of information, our memories, and our essence and our being, which dies when we die, and so forth. It's no more mysterious, by the way, where you go after you die than where you were before you were born. Why does nobody get all fussed up about, well, where was I before I was born?
Why we would be nice to other people. That is altruism, the problem of cooperation in evolution. Why would we do this? I mean, wouldn't it be better if we were just nasty, selfish, hoarding monsters and just took care of ourselves and nobody else? No, actually, if you're a social species, it's good to help your kin and kind, because they are your genetic relations, and therefore the cost you put out is paid off by the benefit of helping others. And then you can expand that with reciprocal altruism and a few other social evolution tools that shows why we would be nice to even those who are not our immediate kin and kind. Anyway, long story short, it's a cost-benefit ratio formula that's been worked out mathematically, and that I apply to why we would make more of one kind of error than the other kind of error. The kind of error that's low cost. It doesn't take much. It doesn't cost you much to just assume everything is real. Usually those things don't take you out of the gene pool. Just picture people reading their astrology column or something like that. Most of the time, it doesn't get you killed, but it is certainly a superstition or a form of magical thinking. And therefore, I claim we evolved this propensity to believe weird things because we have to believe all sorts of things that turn out to be true, and we don't have a good baloney detection module in our brain to help us always tell the difference between the true patterns and the false patterns. We have to remember science is relatively new. Only a few centuries old. That's what it's designed to do, to tell the difference between true and false patterns. Our brains are not really well designed at that. So, I call this patternicity, the tendency to find meaningful patterns in both meaningful and meaningless noise. But not just the face of Jesus in a tortilla or the Virgin Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich and those sorts of things that are rather amusing. What I'm interested in is why would the brain see those sorts of things in the first place? And the answer is because we have to find meaningful patterns. And so those are just a subset of the important patterns. And if you think about science as a pattern detection device, finding new patterns is good. That's how you win Nobel Prizes. That's how musicians design new musical styles. That's how artists design new artistic styles. They find new patterns that no one else has seen. So I also have a long discussion about creativity and madness and patternicity. So us skeptics tend to make fun of people who see these weird things and why they don't see the world clearly like us scientists do. Well, in fact, it's good to have an open mind and see new patterns. The rub is finding the balance between being open-minded enough that you can see the new patterns, but not so open-minded that your brains fall out and you think every pattern is real. Basically, it boils down to this, that there are a set of mysteries that traditionally we have been unable to explain, that historically have always been explained from a top-down supernatural entity, being of some kind that has always usually been called God or gods. And in the last 10,000 years, there's been roughly about 10,000 gods. So I presume most of you, like me, are atheists when it comes to Zeus and Thor and Ganesha and all the other thousands of gods that people have traditionally believed. And to that extent, you already know where I'm coming from, because you know that there's no evidence for those gods. They're socially constructed. They were part of the culture. People really did believe them then. They don't believe them now. We do recognize, all of us in the room, how that works. I'm just saying it's okay to go one God farther. It's the same principle at work in the culture you happen to have been born in, how you were raised, the particular sets of arguments that are used after you already make that belief commitment, and so forth. Nevertheless, of course, those arguments are still made after the fact. Let me clarify one thing. Atheist, non-theist, agnostic, bright, whatever. The labels are problematic because it assumes that you already know what I'm talking about when I talk about this particular word. Atheism is just a lack of belief in a God. It isn't a thing to be. It isn't a position to take. It's not like a political position where we have 7 planks that we adhere to. It's just, I just don't believe in God. That's it. So in the Q&A, don't ask me, do you have faith in atheism, or isn't atheism a religion? No, it isn't anything. It's just a starting point. No, I don't believe. Now let's talk about what we do believe. And if you want in the Q&A, we can go about other things that we do believe, human rights or civil liberties or whatever, but that's not religion, that's politics. Okay, what about Charlie Hebdo and this? Okay, this is a concern. I am worried about this. I'm a magazine publisher. I don't want to end up like this guy. Now we're a science magazine, so I don't really deal with religion that much, and we've never done anything on Islam. And I don't want to have to be like Sam Harris and Ayaan Hirsi Ali and travel with bodyguards. I really don't want to do that. But why do they have to do that? I went to see Ayaan speak at Occidental College in LA, and she's there with bodyguards, and there were some Muslim women that were there to protest her. And, they waited until she was done in Q&A. You're insulting our religion, we're not violent, and so on. Then why do I have to have armed guards standing here? It was like, boop, end of conversation. I mean, that's right, that's the problem. So, all right, so here's a little pop quiz that I've been trying out. I don't know if this is offensive or not. I'm among friends, I know, but if this was a general audience, what did the murderers shout when they killed the staff at Charlie Hebdo? Moses rocks, Jesus saves, Vishnu lives, Buddha thrives, atheists rule. Yeah, I mean, we all know. I mean, we knew before, yeah, of course. So we know what the problem is. Okay, but what is the problem? First of all, are we criticizing the people or are we criticizing their ideas? So you say, well, religion is the problem. Well, that's too general because there's so many different kinds of religions. Even religious extremists are not the problem. Jains are religious extremists. They're really nutty. They don't kill like even gnats. They walk down the street and they carefully not to step on an ant. They don't want to kill anything. That's extreme. But I don't lay awake worrying about the Jains coming to my house, blowing up our offices or anything like that. So it's not just that. So it's violent religious extremists are the problem. Those that embrace bad ideas like Sharia law. So if you saw the collision between Sam Harris and what's his name? Ben Affleck, the actor on Bill Maher. They're just talking at cross purposes. Sam's talking about religious ideas, like Sharia ideas, and Affleck's talking about you're insulting people. Okay, it's talking at cross purposes. We operate in the world of ideas. We're into science and reason and ideas. So what is it that people believe? Because it's beliefs that drive people to act. So here are just a few percentages of medium percentage of Muslims who favor enshrining Sharia law as the official law of a country. 84%, 77%. We're talking 3/4, 2/3, almost 1 out of 5. And that's a 2013 Pew. These are all from a Pew study in 2013. Higher support for Sharia where Islam is officially the favored religion. So these are percentage of Muslims who say Sharia should be the official law in countries where Islam is officially favored religion. All right, almost everybody, 9 out of 10, 3/4, over half in the entire database. Or percentage of Muslims who say Sharia laws developed by men, by humans, or developed the revealed word of God. So these are gigantic percentages. And so it's not a trivial handful of bad apples that just kind of got sidetracked in some weird cult. And if we could just isolate a couple of those, we're okay. I think the problem could be bigger than that. Do you favor corporal punishment for crimes such as theft? And so these are, beatings, stonings, whippings, what called caning. Again, these are non-trivial numbers in a lot of different countries. Or favor stoning as punishment for adultery. Not the guys, of course. Or percentage of Muslims who favor executing those who leave the religion. Okay, these are really bad ideas. These are dumb ideas. These are morally stupid ideas that are grounded in religion that have to be debunked. Just like we already debunked the witch theory of causality, as I call it in the book. If you believe that women cavorting with demons in the middle of the night causes crop failures and disease and accidents, then you're either insane or you lived 500 years ago when everybody believed that. So what happened to the witch theory of causality? We debunked it. We now have a good theory of germs and a theory of the weather. We have meteorology, we have epidemiology, and we know how diseases operate and so forth. So we don't need that theory anymore. And we have to do something like that with all the other bad religious, superstitious ideas. So to that we say 9. This is the Berliner Courier. Our freedoms you will not murder. This is the day after. Or the Independent. Where was the American press on this? So here's a real interesting tension between amongst liberals and those of us who share liberal ideas and freedom of speech, but we also don't want to offend everybody. Well, sometimes you got to offend people. It's just if they have bad ideas, sometimes you got to just challenge those bad ideas. Now maybe the sort of more forceful approach doesn't work for everybody, but it works for some people. It's the Dawkins approach, the Hitchens, just nail them, hitch slap them. Sometimes that's what people need. And then I talk a little bit about politics and think about the confirmation bias and all the different cognitive biases. In the context of the larger thesis of the book, that beliefs come first, and then the reasons for belief come after the fact. So if you're a Republican, for example, you probably listen to conservative talk radio and you read the Wall Street Journal and you filter everything through that. And if you're liberal, you listen to progressive talk radio. Well, I guess nobody listens to progressive talk radio. You listen to NPR and then you read the New York Times or whatever and you filter everything through that. Now, of course, nobody says I'm a Republican because my parents were, or my peer group, they're all Republicans, so, I just go along with the herd. Nobody thinks that. Nobody says that. What we say is, well, I have all these reasons. I have my 12 reasons why I vote Republican or Democrat, why I believe in free markets or fair markets, why I have this attitude or that attitude about gays or abortion or whatever. But my claim is that the beliefs all come first through a whole series of social, political, psychological, personal, where you happen to be born, who your parents were, where you were raised, what schools you went to. Those things all shape our beliefs. Even for scientists, that is that nobody comes to the table and just scatters the data out there and goes, I think I'll see which is the best hypothesis to explain it. No, because to even become a scientist, you have to go to graduate school. And go to graduate school, you have to be accepted into some program in which a professor will allow you to work in his lab. This professor is not unbiased. He has his own pet theories and hypotheses, his worldview, his paradigm that he's working in, along with the community of his colleagues. So you're already sort of pushed along in that. By the time you become a scientist, you're way down the path. You already believe all sorts of things. Before you know hardly any of what the data is. You're just sort of sucked into it. And then you look for the data to fit it. Okay, so we have the same problem in science that everybody else has. The difference is that if you don't look for your disconfirming data against your theory, somebody else will advance their career by debunking your silly theory in a published forum with great glee, and that's what makes science different. It's a competitive enterprise.